ransacking the tombs of Egypt's great kings and queens. They've been stealing from the dead since the beginning of time. It's a centuries-old cat-and-mouse game between tomb robbers and royalty. In this hour, investigate the Tomb Raiders and watch as the ancient pharaohs use ingenious technology to outsmart them as we enter the minds of Egypt's greatest criminals. Ancient Egypt, 1200 BC. It's the height of the Egyptian Empire, and there's a crime wave. This man is part of it. He's a notorious tomb robber, and he's in the middle of one of his biggest heists. His name is Pa-Nep. His rap sheet includes robbery, sexual assault, bribery, and possibly even murder. He may be the first criminal in recorded history. Unknown to Pa-Nep, someone is watching him and recording every move. The big heist tonight? Knocking over the tomb of the pharaoh Seti II. He's cocky enough to help himself to some wine, meant for the gods. He doesn't worry about being caught because he's bribed all the guards. Pa-Nep and other tomb robbers like him defy kings and gods. The risks are high. If he gets caught, Pharaoh's enforcers will impale him on a stake. The rewards are tempting. A fortune in oils, fine linen, silver, and gold. In Pa-Nep's time, Egypt's desert sands are filled with buried treasure. For nearly 2,000 years, the pharaohs built pyramids and tombs as gateways to their version of heaven. They believed the afterlife was a lot like Egypt, so they needed to bring food and supplies. They stocked up on staples and luxuries, filling their tombs with supplies and offerings to the gods. Everyone knew about the buried treasure. And a few of them, like Pa-Nep, were willing to defy their religion and risk their lives to steal it. From the start, the pharaohs knew tomb raiding was a threat, so they tried to make it impossible for thieves to break into their burial places. They had a powerful motive. The pharaohs believed if the thieves damaged their mummies and tombs, the gods would bar the pharaohs' entry into the afterlife. The thieves weren't just lifting their stuff, they were stealing their immortality. Amidst the pyramids and tombs of ancient Egypt, it was an endless game of cat and mouse. The tomb robbers were constantly changing their tactics, while the kings battled to protect their afterlives. 2500 BC. This is Meidum. Built 50 miles south of Cairo, it was one of the first pyramids and a right target. But how did the cat and mouse game play out here? Archaeologist Salima Ikram is an expert on tomb raiding.
This tomb really gives one an idea of what it was like to be an ancient tomb robber. They would have had to break through this thick wall of mud brick and then hack their way through this desert gravel, going all the way in through basically what was making another entryway into the tomb.
Tomb robbing was tough work.
It's very narrow and tight, but it would have taken several days' work, probably, to hack their way through here in an effort to get down into the burial chamber. And then, after that, they had to hack through what the ancient Egyptians had built, because the burial chamber was actually made out of limestone blocks.
The tomb robbers needed to plan their operations meticulously. The only tools they had were hard stones and simple chisels. They'd have to tunnel through hundreds of feet of solid rock and do most of their work at night. So it would take weeks of back-breaking work to get to the burial chamber itself. First, they'd scoop up everything lying around the chamber, but to get the big payoff, they'd have to shift the sarcophagus.
You can see that they pushed it over. There must have been several of them pushing quite hard, and to keep it up, they put a wooden mallet there, which after over 4,000 years is still there. It's a frozen moment in time where the thieves had put this mallet and pushed with all their might and gotten this granite sarcophagus lid out of the way.
They needed just enough room to reach inside and get the jewels.
And then, of course, their goal was the body. And a body was found here by archaeologists later on, but it had nothing on it. So all of the grave goods, any of the jewelry that might have been there, beads, scarabs, amulets, all of these would have been taken by the tomb robbers.
These first pyramids were ancient billboards advertising their treasures. Within 1,000 years, raiders had emptied most of them. By 1400 BC, the pharaohs had had enough. They decided to change tactics. They stopped building pyramids and instead decided to search for a top-secret location to bury their dead. The pharaohs found it 300 miles away. The perfect place, the Valley of the Kings. The valley was just across the Nile from Egypt's capital, the city of Thebes, now known as Luxor. Over the next 500 years, the Valley of the Kings became the graveyard for every pharaoh. To be sure the tombs were safe, the pharaohs had their builders carve them out of sheer rock. Secrecy was paramount. The Valley of the Kings' first architect wrote this inscription:
I supervised the excavations of the cliff tomb of His Majesty alone, so no one else in the world would see, and no one else would hear.
But there was a problem. The royal burial business got too big, and the secret was out. Within 100 years, the valley became packed with dead rulers, and an entire industry boomed with thousands of workers. One of them is the known criminal, Paneb. It's 1200 BC, the reign of Seti II. The tomb workers, stonemasons, coppersmiths, carpenters, and artists are making a decent living. But for some, it's not enough. Paneb was orphaned at an early age and destined to become a beggar. But Paneb got lucky. A powerful foreman from the nearby workers' village of Deir el-Medina adopts him. Now Paneb has a chance to advance in a town that serves a vital role. Egyptologist Sally Katari has studied Paneb's town for years.
This is the village of Deir el-Medina, a very important village of necropolis workmen for the Pharaoh of Egypt, because he entrusted to the men of this village the supreme task of carving, hewing, decorating, furnishing the tombs not only of the king but of the queens and the royal children.
From here, the workers commuted to the valley to build and maintain the great tombs of the pharaohs.
Over there is the temple of Medinet Habu, the mortuary temple of Ramses III. Over here would be the direction of the Valley of the Queens, and up over this direction would be the Valley of the Kings, to which the men had to make their weekly trek.
The scribes at Deir el-Medina kept extensive records that survive today. The pharaohs paid the workers in goods, grain for making beer and bread, and 10 pounds of fish a day. And a foreman like Paneb's adopted father earned more than he needed.
They were a pampered community. They were used to a level of life which was comfortable. The workmen at Deir el-Medina were something like a middle-class engineer who owned a 6-room house, a car, and was able to take a holiday, say at Disney World. So we're talking about people we can identify with.
These middle-class Egyptians didn't have to steal to feed themselves. But it was like living next to a bank vault they built and having the keys to get in. Paneb grows up comfortably, but for him, it's not enough. He's not shy about telling people he wants his stepfather's job as foreman. His opportunity comes soon enough. Paneb's stepfather is murdered. No one knows who did it or why. If some suspect Paneb, no one can prove it. Bystander sees him bribing a local official, and soon after, Paneb lands his stepfather's job. Paneb's step-uncle had wanted the job and resents Paneb's promotion. He's determined to build a case against him and keeps a detailed record of Paneb's activities. Paneb's now in a position to cash in. As foreman of a building crew, he knows where the tombs are and how to break in. And it's easy to recruit accomplices.
They saw the riches that went into the tombs, they saw the degree of decoration, and were perhaps resentful of the great riches that were going to be going under the ground for eternity, and would have liked to have a bit of this for themselves.
Paneb's men will do the dirty work, and he'll be the mastermind. It's an ancient version of a modern crime ring, and the ultimate inside job. Only those in the know, the tomb builders themselves, would have a real chance of success. People like Paneb. Paneb and his gang go after tombs and temples, anything they can get their hands on. High-quality linen, perfumes, and oils. Small figurines and furniture to sell on the local black market. And at the top of the list, silver and gold. the open market. And now, Paneb and his ring are planning the heist of a lifetime. His crime is big by Egyptian standards. It's part of a familiar cat and mouse game played out in ancient Egypt. Starting as early as 3000 BC, Egypt's royal architects devised clever obstacles, creating tombs full of false passages, dead ends, pits, and other barriers. Among the most ingenious is the tomb of Teti et Saqqara.
There was a long passage carved deep into the bedrock, which finally opened into this room, which is where they stored some of the blocking stones, because this was one of the ways that they tried to keep away tomb robbers. And this is, of course, the first great blocking stone, the first portcullis made out of granite. It would have been perched up here until the burial was complete, and then it was dropped down. And this is sort of solid 4 feet of very hard granite, which are still in place, which is what would have stopped the tomb robbers from going in and disturbing the king's eternal rest.
Once the high priests had placed the pharaoh's mummy and his treasure in the inner chamber, their workmen would have yanked the wooden posts. The massive granite blocks would then crash to the chamber floor. To get in, the tomb robbers would have to chisel away the stone, one chip at a time. So tomb robbers like Paneb, 1800 years later, would have to overcome all of these obstacles and more. The pharaohs ordered their priests to turn the tomb walls themselves into a threat. The priests devised elaborate curses, and the workers inscribed them strategically throughout the tomb.
The ancient Egyptian tomb curses, which describe what the deceased might do to a tomb violator, is actually mentioned in this little bit of an inscription, because we have at the tail end here of these lines of text statements that anyone who attacks this tomb, I will seize his neck like a goose. And here is the word goose. So this actually contains the remainder of that goose curse, if you will, to literally come out as a ghost, grab the offender by the neck, and throttle him to death on the spot.
Curses came in all shapes and sizes.
His lifetime shall not exist on earth. He shall have no heir. A donkey shall violate him. A donkey shall violate his wife. He shall die from hunger and thirst.
The question of how much effect any of these threats actually had is hard to measure, because so many Egyptian tombs are in fact damaged and robbed, almost all of them. The one way that we can see that this did have an effect is that when tomb robbers come into a tomb, one of the first things they typically do is to attack the images, the faces of the tomb owner, which means they recognize that this figure might in fact be a threat, and so they go and hack out his face so he can't see them as they come in, and so he can't manifest himself as a ghost and literally go in and get them.
But hardened criminals like Paneb didn't fear the wrath of God or the priest's curses. After all, once you robbed a tomb and lived to tell the tale, the curses became empty threats. Paneb defines brazen. His step-uncle sees him stealing in broad daylight. He went to the funeral of a king and took a golden goose, though he denied having it. But it was found in his house. Stealing in broad daylight is one thing, but raiding a major tomb forces Paneb to use the cover of night. It's his biggest heist yet. He and a gang member set out to scout their target. But this is no ordinary job. The pharaoh, Seti II, has died after a 6-year reign. And when a pharaoh dies, that means a fresh tomb full of treasures. Paneb still doesn't know his step-uncle is shadowing him and taking notes. Paneb cases the new tomb, then goes home to plan the break-in. It may have taken him several days. First, he has to bribe the guards. They'll look the other way while he cracks open the tomb. Then he'll hack his way into the burial chamber. The work may take several nights. Describes the heist in progress.
When the burial was complete, Paneb broke into the tomb and began to steal the things of the king. He took away the cover of the chariot and took away the wine and all sorts of treasure. He even went so far as to sit on the king's coffin, although the body was inside.
Did the step-uncle rat him out, or did Paneb forget to bribe a guard? Here the eyewitness account breaks off, but one thing's clear. This time, the guards nail him in the act. Now he'll face justice, Egyptian style. And it won't be pretty. His step-uncle's the chief witness against him, but he's not an unbiased witness. He believes Paneb stole his job. The guards haul Paneb to jail. He'll stay there until his trial. And while Paneb's personal crime spree is over, tomb robbing is about to become even more popular. By 1150 BC, the Egyptian Empire has started to crumble. Rebellious border states and foreign invaders challenged the reign of Ramses III. The attacks stretch Egypt's resources to the breaking point. In the river valley, the rains haven't come. The Nile is shrinking. It's a drought, and the crops are failing. At the workers' village of Deir el-Medina, the comfortable world that Paneb lived in has vanished. The hard times ignite an uprising. The middle-class workers become a mob. It's the first recorded strike in history.
20 days have gone by without rations. We are left without any staple from reserves. Truly, we are already dying. We are no longer alive.
Chaos and hunger turn more and more people into thieves.
When there came a time after the empire was lost, certainly there would come to be an even stronger feeling among the people that it somehow was not right, that all these riches were hidden away in the deep, dark recesses of tombs, and that how much better would it be if everyone had a share in all of this.
What follows is a crime wave that will force Egypt's high priests to take drastic new measures. BC, the Valley of the Kings. Once the final resting place for Egypt's greatest pharaohs, it's now a royal junkyard. Tomb robbers have smashed open the crypts, stolen their treasures, and trashed the royal mummies.
These bodies were found in 1898 in exactly the state which the tomb robbers left them, stripped of their wrappings and badly damaged. First of all, the ends of the feet have been broken away. Then one of the hands has been broken away. And as we move on up the body, we can see that a large hole has been hacked in the chest. And also, while probably trying to add ornaments around the head and neck area, the side of the mouth has been smashed open. And there we have at the end of this particular glass case is a spare hand, which they turned up alongside these. There were also a number of broken up remains of bodies also found in the same tomb, spread around in some of the other chambers. So this arm probably belongs with a couple of skulls which were found in a shaft further up the tomb.
The royal priests were horrified. The Egyptians believed that if you destroyed a body, you destroyed all hope for an afterlife. You were closing the gates to heaven. The priests decided something had to be done. There were still scores of royal tombs with their mummies inside, each threatened with looting. The priests searched for a new hiding place deep in the mountains. So far away and hidden, the mummies and their treasures would never be found again. They emptied all the tombs and transferred the mummies to temporary workshops. They stripped, rebandaged, and placed them in wooden coffins. Then, they took them to a secret cache in the cliffs surrounding the Valley of the Kings. There, the royals' bodies and their treasure would finally be safe for eternity. The priests and pharaohs abandoned the Valley of the Kings. They moved the capital 300 miles north, near the city that's now called Cairo. But the priests still had to figure out how to keep the new burial chambers safe from thieves. Their royal architects devised ingenious new tombs, using radical new technology. They dug shafts up to 100 feet deep and placed burial chambers at the bottom. Then they got inventive with something easy to find in Egypt: sand.
These shafts are about 60 feet deep, and they were carved by the Egyptians once they had finally figured out how to bury themselves without having their graves robbed. And you get these shafts going all the way down straight through the bedrock and opening into chambers. At the end of the burial, these would have been filled up with sand and sealed, so that there was no way into them unless you dug all the way down, 60, 80, sometimes even 100 feet.
Workers filled the main shaft with sand and placed the sarcophagus at the top. Then they dug the sand out from underneath the sarcophagus, and it gradually sank to the bottom. They poured the same sand back on top of it, making it invisible from the surface and impenetrable.
This huge sarcophagus that is here must have come down using a combination of sand hydraulics and ropes. What happens was that up here, above this roof, there really is a big shaft. This lid must have been put on the top of the shaft when the shaft was filled with sand, and then gradually as the sand was moved, the lid would have descended.
Tomb raiders still tried to tunnel in, but the shaft tombs fought back.
Sometimes tomb robbers thought that if they made parallel shafts, they would be able to sort of access the burial chamber, but the whole burial chamber would have been filled with sand, and so if the tomb robbers broke into it, all they would be faced with would be more sand, which would in fact pour into their parallel shaft and would in fact suffocate them.
The tomb raiders were buried alive. In fact, even today, gaining access to these tombs requires feats of engineering and lots of manpower. Archaeologists have only recently found their way in.
This is the bottom part of the sarcophagus, and this huge piece of limestone would have been lowered down as well. These tombs were definitely the most efficient way of keeping out tomb robbers, because of all the ones that we found, almost all but a handful have been found intact.
The shaft tombs worked, and so did the secret mummy cache in the Valley Cliffs. Till a remarkable discovery 3,000 years later. The pharaohs are ancient history. Egyptian officials announce an extraordinary discovery. A secret cache filled with famous mummies. The story behind it is controversial. As it's told, a farmer named Ahmed al-Rasul is walking through the desert when one of his goats gets lost. Rasul follows the goat's cries until he stumbles upon a deep crevasse. He makes his way inside and, to his amazement, finds himself standing in a tomb. But not just any tomb. It's crowded with coffins, mummies, and treasure. Gold and jewels are everywhere. Thousands of precious objects, bronze vases, alabaster cups, glass jars, and ornate statues. Rasul has stumbled upon the motherlode. It's the secret royal mummy cache hidden by the priests 3,000 years ago. He's about to turn it into the world's most successful tomb-robbing franchise. In Rasul's hometown, Kurna, historian Dylan Bickerstaff has come to investigate Rasul's story.
Shukran.
The village rests on the site of countless tombs.
people who came to live in Gurna inevitably learned how to find tombs. By accident at first. They were just trying to extend their houses and put another room in or something, and they'd stumble into another tomb. And eventually, of course, they're not stupid, they learnt the sort of locations that tombs were in. And there was a lot of spoil in those to sell to tourists.
It's likely that Rasul's family shared their extraordinary find with their neighbors, if only to keep them quiet. And this may have encouraged further tomb robbing. As collectors clamored for more, the local raiders did their best to satisfy the demand.
There's a leg.
But Kurna was only the training ground.
The Rasul brothers lived in this area, and they went on to discover tombs in all kinds of remote locations. The Royal Cache. So, expertise started in Gurna, spread to far and wide.
From Kurna, Bickerstaff retraces their route to the mummy cache.
Yes, here you can see TT320, the Royal Cache. Tombs like this, cut into clefts, these chimney tombs as they're called, were specifically designed so that they will become hidden.
Bickerstaff doesn't buy Rasul's story that he accidentally stumbled on the Royal Cache. He believes Rasul was out searching for treasure. The Rasuls found other tombs and caches nearby. They knew exactly what to look for.
Nature itself would disguise them over the course of time. So when it rained, all the rubble that was brought down would gradually fill up the location and you wouldn't be able to see where the tomb was. And the brothers knew to look in cracks like this and examine to see where the water was disappearing. And it definitely wasn't whilst looking for a goat.
For years, the Rasul brothers kept their finds secret from Egyptian authorities. Tomb robbing is still a crime. If they get caught, they'll do hard time. So they sold just a few pieces at a time to avoid raising suspicion. But eventually, these one-of-a-kind pieces show up on the black market and attract the attention of authorities. They trace them back to the Rasul brothers and arrest them. The Rasuls are jailed for months, interrogated and beaten. Finally, one of them, Muhammad Rasul, cracks and agrees to show them the cache. In 1881, Muhammad leads Emil Bruch, an antiquities inspector, to the site. Backed by government authority, he's here to recover the treasure. When Bruch sees the contents of the tomb, he can't believe his eyes.
Standing against the wall or lying on the floor, I found an even greater number of mummy cases. Their gold covering and their polished surface reflected my excited state. It seemed as though I was looking into the faces of my own ancestors.
Mummies, many of them the most famous pharaohs of ancient Egypt. Seti I, Thutmosis III, and Ramses II. It's the most important archaeological discovery in Egyptian history, and it's worth a fortune. Bruch has good reason to fear for his life. He needs to keep the news quiet while he moves the mummies and the remaining treasure to safety. He recruits 300 men. In 48 hours, they remove all the mummies, then take them to the Nile. As his ship leaves for Cairo, the local women wail, while the men fire guns.
They say this was a last tribute to the ancestors, the great kings of old, but probably it was a lamentation over the loss of so much revenue from the region.
When the 40 mummies arrive in Cairo, the recovered treasure makes global headlines. But Bruch's handling of the coffins sparks fierce controversy. In his haste, Bruch mixed up many of the mummy cases and their treasures. No one could tell who was who. And 120 years later, many of the mummies' identities still remain a mystery. Since 1998, archaeologist Erhard Graef has been scouring the cache for clues. Dr. Graef has been trying to find anything that will identify the mystery mummies. He takes Dylan Bickerstaff to the base of the 100-foot shaft, to the very spot where Rasul first found the cache in 1881.
The location of the coffins is so crucial because this is one of the reasons for reopening the cache. People were working with the thinnest amount of information, just the vaguest hints, and they're looking very closely at these minute clues to try and work out where the coffins were.
Pottery which was destroyed here, and then here the effect of unwrapping mummies.
This is the chamber where Rasul found the mummies. But the ceiling collapsed decades ago, and the cave's now covered with 6 feet of limestone rubble. Dr. Graef has yet to solve the mystery of which pharaohs were stashed where. But he keeps digging, determined to make sense from the chaos created by Bruch's haste and the greed of the Rasuls. As for the informer, Muhammad Rasul, not only did he escape punishment, the authorities gave him a job with the Antiquity Service. The tomb robber became a tomb finder. But not all tomb robbers were this fortunate, especially the one we know as Paneb in ancient Egypt. It's 1200 BC. Paneb stands accused of a series of offenses, including theft, assault, attempted murder, and tomb raiding. He's used his inside job as a foreman working on the tombs in the Valley of the Kings as a staging ground for robbery. His biggest job, knocking over the tomb of Seti II, has landed him in jail. And his step-uncle, who's been shadowing him, is the state's chief witness against him.
From everything that we know about Paneb, from the condemnations to the confirmations of his crimes, there is absolutely no way that we can find much good in Paneb. He seems to have been a totally unscrupulous man who did not hesitate to commit crimes of bribery, of sexual assault, of theft, of sacrilege. There is nothing that we know about Paneb that in any way can justify his character.
As a tomb robber, Paneb didn't respect the royal's afterlife, but he seems to have made plans of his own.
This is the burial chamber of Paneb. So he built this tomb for himself and went through all this elaborate trouble in bringing extra stones for it and making it especially beautiful. And then eventually the law caught up to him.
If he's found guilty, this tomb will stand empty. And he too will be denied eternal life. But Paneb's agony probably started before his trial. Egyptian police routinely beat and mutilated their prisoners, partly to interrogate, but also to punish. They used torture to extract confessions. Eventually, Paneb would stand trial before a panel of judges. Egyptian justice was harsh, even for minor offenses.
We have here a situation showing justice being meted out in ancient Egypt. The ancient Egyptians were great believers in justice, regardless of what you had done. Now, this one, in fact, shows people who are being punished because they didn't pay their taxes. And that was a relatively minor infringement of the law. So he's being beaten up. Beating was one of the punishments. Of course, if you had been a tomb robber for a king, things would have been much worse, because the king was a god, and that would be a major infraction against both religious and civil law. The punishment of 5 cuts, where you have your nose cut off, your eyes pulled out, lips, sometimes even the tongue, and the ears, so you lose all your senses. Also, they would be beaten, and sometimes they would be killed by being impaled. And then their names would be eradicated from everywhere, which means that they wouldn't exist. And for an ancient Egyptian, that just means you're annihilated completely and you have no life in this world or even the next.
Today, anyone caught taking antiquities discovered since 1983 is prosecuted, and often sentenced to hard labor. But stiff new laws haven't stopped the tomb robbing. Because they're harder to get, stolen goods have more value than ever. Stone statues and carvings now fetch thousands, if not millions of dollars in London and New York. Now, just as it was 3,000 years ago, the motive for tomb robbing is greed. And though it may lead to serving hard time today, in Paneb's era, justice was far more severe. The precise details of his trial no longer exist, but we know he was replaced by a new foreman. Apart from that, all traces of his name vanished from official records.
Because he did rob from the tomb of Seti II, the capital punishment that was probably enacted in this case would have been impalement. Impalement on a stick, a horizontal stick, where it would go right through the body, an Egyptian form of crucifixion.
Paneb would have died slowly, and when he did, his body was most likely dumped in the desert, his flesh left to rot in the sun, his bones picked clean. The tomb he built to help him to the afterlife stands empty. These days, Egypt's monuments and museums stand heavily guarded. As in Paneb's time, corruption flourishes just below the surface, The cat and mouse game continues. Egypt is a relatively poor country where a piece of old ceiling can fetch more than a year's wages. If an Egyptian finds something on his property, he must hand it over to the government. Trading antiquities is strictly illegal. And there's plenty to uncover in Egypt. We've only scratched the surface. Most of the country's ancient wealth may still lie beneath the ground, ripe for the taking. Years ago, the pharaohs believed their only shot at immortality was to keep their tombs safe and ensure their own passage to the afterlife. But now, in an odd turn of events, the mummies plundered by tomb robbers have achieved a kind of immortality. This wasn't the eternity the pharaohs imagined. But the world now knows their names. Their bodies are safe and cared for. Their treasures on display. The pharaohs could never have dreamed that eternal life would come from the endless, ancient battle